The apartment smelled of damp walls and old fear. Outside, the Chicago night pressed against the window like a heavy, uninvited guest. Sophia sat cross-legged on the floor, arranging the colored pencils her mother had bought for her last week when the door burst open. It happened so suddenly that she didn't even have time to scream. 2 men in black coats stormed inside their boots, striking the floor like thunder. One grabbed her mother, Elena shoving her against the wall. The other pressed a hand over Elena's mouth before she could cry out. Sophia froze. Her heart pounded in her chest the way it did when she had nightmares. She wanted to run, but her legs refused to move. She wanted to cry, but her throat was locked tight. The taller man hissed something in Italian words Sophia didn't understand and yanked Elena toward the door. Elena's eyes searched the room frantic and landed on Sophia. For a brief second, mother and daughter stared at each other. Then Elena mouthed, "Hide," before she was dragged away into the night. Sophia's little hands trembled. She crawled under the table, watching the shadow of the men disappear. Silence filled the apartment, a silence so heavy it pressed down on her lungs. Her eyes fell on the phone that had slipped from her mother's coat pocket during the struggle. It lay on the floor screen, glowing faintly. Sophia crawled to it, picked it up, and stared. She didn't know what to do. She was only 7. But she was clever enough to know that calling the police could mean nothing but danger. Her mother had warned her about it again and again. Never trust the police. Never talk to strangers about our lives. The phone's screen lit up with the contact list, names blurred in front of her frightened eyes until one caught her attention. Just one word saved at the top of the list. Husband. Sophia frowned. Her mother had never mentioned a husband. She had never seen a father. But the word seemed important, almost sacred. And in this moment of desperation, she felt it was the only chance she had. Her fingers shook as she tapped it. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. She was about to hang up when a voice answered. A deep, commanding voice, like the rumble of distant thunder. "Who is this?" Sophia clutched the phone with both hands, pressed it to her ear. Her lips quivered, and the words slipped out before she could stop them. "Please, Father, they have taken my mother. They will kill her. Please, save my mother." Silence followed. Heavy silence. On the other end of the line, Don Lorenzo Vitale sat in his oak-panelled office, the glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. Around him, lieutenants stood in tense silence, their discussions about territory and enemies suddenly cut short by the child's voice. The word she had used, father, struck him like a blade. He leaned back in his chair, his hand tightening around the receiver. "Who are you?" he asked slowly, every syllable edged with steel. Sophia sniffled, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm Sophia. My mother is Elena. Men came and took her. Please, Father, they'll hurt her. They'll hurt us." The name? Elena. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. Memories long buried surged up a night years ago, a woman's face blurred by the haze of whiskey and smoke, a mistake he had never thought about again. And now out of nowhere a child's trembling voice on the phone calling him father. His lieutenants shifted uneasily, exchanging glances. They had never heard their boss sound so still, so shaken. At last, Lorenzo spoke, his voice low, dangerous. "Where are you now, Bambina?" Sophia looked around the empty apartment, the scattered pencils, the door swinging open to the cold night. I'm alone. Please, don't let them hurt my mother. Lorenzo exhaled slowly, the sound like fire through his teeth. For years he had ruled with iron, feared by enemies, obeyed by allies. But nothing had pierced him the way this tiny voice had, whispering into the phone, calling him father. He turned to his men. Find her! Now! The lieutenants nodded sharply and hurried from the room, already barking orders into their radios. Lorenzo remained where he was, holding the receiver to his ear. His voice softened just slightly, though it still carried the weight of command. Listen to me, Sophia. Stay where you are. Do not open the door to anyone but my men. Do you understand? Yes. Father. The last word lingered warm and fragile inside the cavern of his chest. For the first time in many years, Don Lorenzo Vitale felt something unfamiliar, not fear of enemies, not rage at betrayal, but the fragile pull of blood of a bond he had never known existed. Outside, the Chicago night roared with sirens and gunshots in the distance. But inside the office of the Mafia boss, silence reigned, broken only by the steady breathing of a man who had just discovered he might not be as alone in the world as he thought. And for Sophia, clutching the phone in her small hands, it was the first flicker of hope in the nightmare that had swallowed her home. The first to reach the building was Marco, broad-shouldered, eyes like flint, a man whose hands had written history in alleys no one photographed. He took the stairs 2 at a time, gun-holstered but ready, the soft creak of the old wood sounding like a warning under his boots. 2 men flanked him, one at the front door, one watching the street. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and bleach. Somewhere a radio crackled through a wall, playing an old Sinatra song, the city's heartbeat disguised as nostalgia. He rapped once. Sophia. A pause. The faintest rustle on the other side. Who is it? Your father sent me, he said, voice low, calm. Marco, from the Vitale family. The chain slid back. The door opened a palm's width. One wide brown eye peered out from the darkness, shining with tears that hadn't fallen yet. Marco lowered himself to her height. Palm open, empty. You did well to call, he said, softly. May I come in? She nodded, stepped back. The apartment was small. Liquid spilled across the linoleum like footprints. Colored pencils lay scattered red, blue, green, a tiny riot against the gray. Marco scanned quickly. Window latch, broken curtain, yanked a smear on the frame that might be blood or rust. He signaled one man to the fire escape. The other checked the bedrooms. No movement. Are you hurt? He asked. No, she whispered. They took my mother. We'll bring her back. It was not a promise he made lightly, but the word father had reached even his stony places. He offered a handkerchief. She didn't take it. She stood very still, hands folded, as if she'd been told good children make no sound. His radio clicked. Marco, a voice breathed, Boss wants the line! Marco crouched, thumbed the earpiece, then held the handset toward the girl. He's on. Her breath hitched. Cha Lorenzo's voice was a slower gravity than fear. I'm close, Bambina. 10 minutes. Stay with Marco. He is the safest man I own. A small shaky sound might have been a laugh. Do you own people? It means I have responsibilities, Lorenzo said. His voice gentled on the edges. And you are mine to protect. The line clicked dead. Marco rose. We have to move. This place is glass. He glanced at the window again at the exposed view of the street, the neighboring brick cupping the darkness like a hand. Pack anything small you want to bring. Sophia's feet didn't move. If we leave, how will Mama find me? Your mother is being watched, he said carefully. By us and by them. We don't let them see you. Do you understand? Her throat bobbed. Yeah. She grabbed a small backpack from under the table, shoved in a sweater, the colored pencils a battered paperback with a princess on the cover. Marco wrapped his coat around her shoulders, though she already wore one, the old habit of doubling warmth over children who had lost it too often. He lifted her into his arms when her hands started to shake the way a man who had never fathered still knew to carry a storming sky. They left by the back 2 men ahead, one behind moving fast but quiet. On the landing, Sophia stiffened. They said a name she whispered into Marco's collar. A name like Rinaldi. One of them said, "The Rinaldis will have their due." Marco's pace didn't change, but his pulse counted a new rhythm. Rinaldi. Old ghosts from the riverfront, the kind of enemy that didn't stay buried, only waited for the dirt to crack. Down in the alley, the cold cut like knives. The car idled with lights off a dark shape with darker windows. A second vehicle eased forward, screening the first from the street. Doors opened. Marco set her inside, slid in after her, and the night folded shut. They drove without siren or haste, the city unspooling in sodium and shadow. Sophia pressed her forehead to the glass. She had never been in a car this quiet, this clean. It smelled like leather, and something bitter, like a secret. Marco handed her a bottle of water. Small sips, he said, like he'd said it 1,000 times. At the first red light, another car slid in behind them, matching their speed. Protection layered like coats. The city passed block by block, the pawn shops of West Fulton shuttered. The bakery on Aberdeen Light still on in the back. The river black and moving its breath colder than the air. Old bridges hunched like tired animals. Chicago wore its history like scars turned into street maps. 10 minutes later, iron gates parted. The car rolled past hedges trimmed into obedience, past a fountain holding winter on its stone palms. The house might have been a museum or a myth. Inside floors gleamed paintings watched from frames older than the city. People moved like shadows, the kind that didn't belong to anyone but themselves. And then he was there. Don Lorenzo Vitale did not hurry. He crossed the marble with a measured cadence, a man who had never been pushed except by time. He was not young, but the lines in his face read like a book about surviving. His suit fit like decisions. His eyes found the child first, and did not leave her. Sophia did not move toward him. She stood, backpack clasped to her chest. She had no map for this moment. Her voice skated up and down the same fragile note. Chahe stopped a breath away, not touching her. Up close, she saw the scar at his jaw, clean and thin, like a knife had written its name there, and he had decided to keep it. He knelt a quiet folding until their eyes were level. Sophia, he said, like testing how a new word shaped the mouth. You called me. You did right. Are you really my father? It was a child's question, and it was not. The room changed temperature around them. A man on the staircase stopped breathing. Marco looked at a spot on the floor no one else could see. The name Elena ghosted the ceiling like smoke. Lorenzo did not look away. His reply was simple. I am the man who will get your mother back, and I am the man who should have known you. He let the truth be two halves of one coin. Her shoulders loosened half an inch. They said Rinaldi, she whispered, giving him the one weapon she possessed, before they took her. A muscle shifted in his cheek. I heard. He stood, offered a palm. Come. She hesitated, then slid her small hand into his. It felt like closing a circuit. He led her through a side hall past a grandfather clock that measured time in patience. In a smaller room warm with lamplight, a woman waited with a medical bag. Dr. Morelli Lorenzo said, Please. Sophia flinched. I don't like doctors. This one likes children, he said, steady as a fence post. Humor me. The exam was gentle. Warm, stethoscope-soft questions that gave answers even if she didn't know them. Morelli's smile was stern in the way good teachers are. She's in shock, but resilient, she told Lorenzo. Sugar's low. Something sweet now, real food, soon rest tonight. No separation. Lorenzo nodded once. You'll stay, he told Sophia. You'll sleep here where the walls are thick. Will Mama know where I am? She will when we speak to her, he said. We will speak to her. He turned to Marco. War room. 10 minutes. They ate in a kitchen that looked like photographs of kitchens shining steel bowls in neat towers. Someone sliced bread without looking down. Someone else stirred a pot that made the air smell like tomatoes saved from summer. A plate appeared in front of Sophia pasta with butter cheese like snow, a cup of milk. She ate with concentration, like completing a task assigned by a solemn teacher. Lorenzo stood nearby, not sitting, not hovering a mountain pretending to be furniture. Why did Mama save your number as husband? She asked suddenly, not looking up. The room's quiet changed. Kitchen sounds receded. Steam turned to mist. Lorenzo spoke after the pause a careful man takes before stepping onto old ice. It is a complicated word, he said. Your mother and I did not marry, but she wanted a label that would make people leave her alone. Sometimes, the world listens to that word. Sophia chewed, brow furrowed. People are silly, she decided. They should listen to good people, not words. People listen to power, he said. Words are one of its uniforms. She was silent for a few bites. Are you a good person? He did not attempt to lie to a child who had already tasted fear. I am a person who keeps his promises, he said. And I am a person who does not forgive those who hurt my family. Her eyes lifted. Am I your family? Something thin in him, a wire stretched too long, finally sang. Yes, he said. Marco appeared in the doorway. Dawn. Lorenzo nodded. He leaned to Sophia, lowered his voice without softening it. You will go with Signora Alma to a room next to mine. 2 guards at the door, 1 inside. The doctor will check you once more after you sleep. If you wake, you call. If you hear anything you don't like, you call. You do not open doors. You do not speak to anyone who does not say your name first. Can you repeat that back to me? She did word for word, like a catechism. He let his palm rest on her hair for the briefest moment, the weight of a blessing. Then he left. The war room was oak and maps and a wall of photographs no one outside the family ever saw. The city lay spread in lines and circles, red pins at the river, blue pins in the west green along the lake. The past watched from frames men in hats beside trucks loaded with barrels during a winter when alcohol was a sin, cousins in black suits on church steps smiling like they'd beaten the law by learning to speak its language. The Vitale crest hung small in a corner, a concession to superstition. Rinaldi Marco said, tossing a folder onto the table. Inside, names like bullets rattled free Carmine Paolo Nico, the sons and nephews of a house the Vitales had starved off the docks after prohibition turned into taxes and unions. The Rinaldis had never forgiven learning to count the way the city counted. They were quiet for years, Morelli said now, without her bag, without her gentle voice. In this room she was not a doctor, but a witness to time. But old men die. Young ones think the rules expired with them, Leverage, another lieutenant, said. They think Elena is leverage. She was kept off our books, Marco added. No paper, no photographs. Likely they didn't know the child existed. They know now, Lorenzo said. He stood palms on the table, the posture of a general who understands both terrain and weather. They don't get to decide what she becomes. A phone on the table buzzed. Marco glanced, jaw tightening. He slid it across. Audio from the corner store across from Elena's building. Camera outside died last month, but the clerk records for his own protection. They listened. Boots. A door. The shuffle of struggle. A voice Italian with a wrong city glued to it. Take her. The kid's not on the list. Move. Another voice, lower, not kind. The number, found it in her pocket. Under husband. Lorenzo's eyes cut to Marco. They heard one ring, Marco said, as if answering a question that hadn't reached the air yet. They didn't expect a child, good Lorenzo said. Then they're slower than they need to be. He began to speak, and men began to move. It was an old language, streets and angles, schedules and habits. They would lock down the river, watch the bridges that liked to forget they were watched. They would check the garages that rented by the hour and never took cash at the desk. They would ask the church janitors who heard confessions made to trash cans. Money would travel without leaving accounts. Favors would be called so gently you wouldn't know they'd been owed. Don Marco said quieter when the flurry paused. If Elena is being used to get to you, they already got to me, Lorenzo said. The honesty didn't taste like defeat. It sounded like oath. The child said, cha. That is not a word you erase. A knock on the frame. Signora Alma, small as a sparrow, indestructible as a brick, stood with a silver tray. The girl is sleeping, she said. Like a rabbit with its eyes open. I gave her the rosary from the drawer. She wrapped the chain around her wrist. Alma looked at Lorenzo the way old women look at kings they diapered as infants. You will not lie to her. If you say you will bring the mother back, you will. He inclined his head, the only bow he owed. I will. Alma nodded, satisfied, and vanished. He looked down at the map again, at the red pins clustered like a rash. They took her from a building smart criminals avoid, he said. Because it has eyes. They wanted those eyes to see something. He tapped a river access road with 2 fingers. We start here. Boss Marco said one more thing. There's chatter about an old debt from Sicily being collected through the Rinaldis. The name Santoro floated once. A flicker ran through the room, an electrical fault from another decade. Santoro. Lorenzo's mouth thinned. "Ghosts expect interest," he said. "We'll pay them in kind." He stepped back from the table, the decision already chosen. "Bring the car," he said. "And the black bag." "Now?" Marco asked, though he already knew the answer. "Now." Lorenzo's eyes lifted to the ceiling as if he could see through floor and plaster to the small body in the bed above the rosary chain biting into a thin wrist. He spoke softly to the room or to himself, no one could tell. "No more children learn fear in my city tonight." When he reached the hallway, the house had arranged itself around the promise. Doors closed, lights shifted. The air took on a taste of iron. He stopped once outside the room where Sophia slept. He didn't enter. He didn't need to. He could picture her as if he'd known her since breath one, knees drawn up under the blanket backpack, hugged like a shield, the cheap phone her mother had dropped now charged on the nightstand like a relic. "Cha," she had said to a stranger. He placed his palm flat against the wood as if measuring the distance between what he had been and what he would be next. Then he walked away, and the house followed, and the city, old scarred and never finished, held its breath for the history that was about to be written again. The night outside the Vitali estate was heavy, a silence stitched with unseen movement. In the war room, maps still spread across the table, Don Lorenzo had given his orders. But a different storm was building, the storm of a father who had just discovered he was one. Sophia lay awake despite the rosary wrapped around her wrist. The guards outside her door were steady shadows, but her heart beat in questions. Would Mama survive? Would this man who called himself her protector keep his word? She pressed the chain tighter, whispering fragments of Hail Marys until sleep came like a thief. Meanwhile, Lorenzo stood at the balcony overlooking the courtyard. Smoke curled from the cigar between his fingers, though he'd forgotten to draw. His mind roamed 30 years back to Sicily, to nights when names like Rinaldi and Santoro weren't whispers, but banners of blood. The girl had given him truth in the most innocent word, cha. It rattled him harder than gunfire ever could. Boss Marco interrupted from the shadows. "We found something." 2 men entered with a battered leather satchel. Inside, papers torn from ledgers, photographs blurred at the edges, and a letter marked with the Rinaldi seal. Lorenzo's jaw hardened as he scanned the contents. It wasn't just a kidnapping. It was a declaration. They wanted Elena alive but humiliated. They wanted the girl scared to remind Lorenzo of debts he'd buried in Sicilian soil. He crushed the cigar into the marble railing. "They think they can pull me back into old wars." His eyes burned. "They will learn Chicago is mine, not theirs." At dawn, Sophia padded into the dining room backpack, still clutched like armor. The long table stretched wider than her old apartment, but only one seat was set across from Lorenzo. He did not eat, only poured her milk, cut the bread himself, and waited until she touched the fork. "You're quiet," he said. "I don't know how to talk to you," she admitted, eyes lowered. "Mama said never talk to strangers. But you're not a stranger. Not anymore." She risked looking at him, but also not safe. He did not flinch. Wise. Safety is a word children shouldn't have to learn. His voice softened. "Your mother tried to give you that. I failed her." Sophia tilted her head. "If you failed, why do you look so certain?" "Because failing once does not mean failing again," he said. "And this time I have no choice." She nodded slowly, as if tasting the truth of it. Hours later, the first lead came in a warehouse near the river, leased under a false name, shipments arriving under Rinaldi control. Marco and 3 lieutenants brought photographs, blurred images of Elena bound but alive being moved under guard. Lorenzo didn't wait. "Prepare the cars." Marco raised a brow. "Personal, Don." "I will see her with my own eyes," Lorenzo replied. "No ghosts steal my blood twice." The convoy slid through Chicago's industrial veins, black cars blending with smoke and frost. Sophia, left behind under heavy guard, pressed her face to the window of her room, watching headlights vanish into the dark. She whispered into the rosary chain, "Bring her back, Cha. Bring Mama back." At the warehouse, the Vitale men moved like tides, silent, unstoppable. Locks broke under steady hands. Shadows became figures, muffled voices silenced by steel. Lorenzo stepped inside, last revolver in hand, heart pounding not with fear, but with the weight of fatherhood newly claimed. And then he saw her, Elena, pale, bruised, but unbroken, tied to a chair in the corner. Her eyes widened, fury and relief colliding at once. "Lorenzo." She breathed half curse, half prayer. But before he could reach her, a voice slithered from the rafters. "Don Vitale." Finally, the king leaves his palace. Figures emerged from the shadows, Rinaldi men armed, grinning. The trap was sprung. The warehouse smelled of rust oil and stale blood. Dust drifted down from the rafters where men with rifles had taken position, their silhouettes sharp against the hanging lamps. Lorenzo's revolver gleamed under the dim light, but his stance was still carved from stone. His eyes were fixed on Elena, bound to the chair, her wrists raw from rope. Her lips trembled not from fear, but from fury. The years between them were suddenly crushed into this moment where past betrayals and buried truths resurfaced under the gaze of enemies. A mocking laugh echoed. The great Don Lorenzo Vitale walking into a cage. "You should have stayed in your marble palace." From the shadows stepped Arturo Rinaldi, slick hair, combed back gold chain catching the light. He twirled a cigarette between his fingers, savoring his advantage. "We could have killed her, you know. But then you wouldn't have come. Blood is the leash, isn't it?" Lorenzo's voice was calm, but every word struck like a hammer. "You've made a mistake," Arturo sneered. "Mistake, no, Don. This is a message. Chicago belongs to the Rinaldis now. Your bloodline ends tonight." A sharp whistle cut the air in order. Guns cocked above. The air thickened. From outside, Marco and the Vitale men slipped into position. Silencers were screwed onto muzzles, blades unsheathed. Marco touched his earpiece, whispering, "On my signal." He knew Lorenzo well enough to wait for that single movement, the one that turned restraint into carnage. Inside, Elena strained against her bonds, her voice cracked but defiant. "Don't give him the satisfaction, Lorenzo. Don't." He silenced her with a glance, not cold, but steady, promising. Then in one sudden move, Lorenzo dropped his revolver, metal clattering against the floor. A murmur rippled through the Rinaldi men. Arturo's smile widened, but Lorenzo's hands weren't surrendering. They were summoning. He raised 2 fingers, the signal. The warehouse erupted. Muffled gunfire cracked from the shadows as Vitale men opened fire on the rafters. Bodies dropped like broken marionettes, blood splattering against rusted beams. Marco stormed through the side entrance blade, flashing, cutting down 2 guards before they could fire. Chaos spun deafening and raw. Rinaldi men scrambled for cover bullets ricocheting off steel. Lorenzo moved with terrifying precision. A knife slipped from his sleeve into his hand, hurled across the room, burying itself into a gunman's throat. He was on the second man before the body hit the ground, wrenching the rifle free and firing a burst into the rafters. Arturo cursed, ducking behind a crate. Kill him. Kill them all. But the tide had already turned. Vitale men fought with ruthless efficiency, shadows cutting down shadows until screams drowned in silence. In the storm, Lorenzo reached Elena. With one slash, the ropes fell from her wrists. Her knees buckled, but he caught her before she fell. Their eyes locked hers, brimming with old hatred, old love and disbelief. "You came," she whispered. "I should never have left," he answered. Before more words could come, a crack split the air. A gunshot close. Elena gasped as blood bloomed across her sleeve. She staggered, clutching her arm. Lorenzo spun, eyes burning. Arturo Rinaldi stood with a pistol smoke curling from the barrel. "Take her," Arturo hissed, aiming again. "But know this, Vitale, your daughter will bleed next." The word struck like thunder. Daughter. He knew. He had learned the truth. Lorenzo's chest tightened. No more games. His finger squeezed the trigger, and the rifle roared. The shot missed Arturo by inches, blasting the wood behind him. By the time Lorenzo fired again, Arturo had vanished into the maze of shadows, his laughter trailing like poison. The warehouse lay in ruined bodies, sprawled smoke thick. Marco pressed gauze to Elena's arm, steady and efficient. "It's clean, Don. She'll live." But Lorenzo's thoughts were elsewhere, on Sofia, on the word Arturo had spit into the air. Their secret was no longer secret. The Rinaldis would not stop now. As the convoy roared back toward the estate, Elena leaned weakly against him. Her voice was hoarse. She called, "You didn't she, Sofia? She used that number." "Yes." His answer was a vow. "She called me Cha, and from now on, no one touches her. No one touches you." But in his heart, he knew the war had only just begun. The estate was quieter than usual, but the silence was heavy, not peaceful. Guards patrolled every corner, their footsteps echoing against marble floors. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed in her borrowed room, clutching the worn rosary tighter than ever. She hadn't slept since Lorenzo and his men had left for the rescue. Every creak in the hallway, every whisper beyond the door made her heart leap. Then the doors opened. Marco entered first, his shirt spattered with dust and gunpowder, his eyes tired. Behind him came Lorenzo, broad and imposing, carrying Elena in his arms. Sophia's breath caught. Her mother's head rested against his chest, her arm wrapped in bloodied bandages. "Mama," she cried, scrambling off the bed and rushing forward. Marco caught her just before she threw herself at Elena, crouching to her level. "Careful, little one," he murmured gently. "Your mother needs rest." Elena stirred at the sound of Sophia's voice, eyes fluttering open just enough to see her daughter's tear-streaked face. "Sophia," she whispered. "I'm here, my love." Lorenzo lowered her onto the bed, his hands surprisingly gentle for a man whose knuckles were still raw from the fight. He stepped back, watching as Sophia crawled onto the mattress to curl beside her mother. Elena's trembling fingers threaded through her daughter's hair, and for a moment the world shrank to the small circle of family. But Lorenzo could not remain outside it. He turned about to leave when Sophia's voice broke the silence. "Cha." The single word froze him. His shoulders stiffened, his breath stilled. Slowly he faced her. Sophia's eyes, so much like Elena's, stared into his wide and searching. "You came back with her," she said softly. "You promised." He swallowed the weight in his throat. "I keep my word." Sophia nodded as if that settled something deep inside her. She leaned against Elena again, whispering, "He kept his word, Mama. He's really my Cha." Elena closed her eyes, pain flickering across her face. "Sophia." But Lorenzo lifted a hand. "Let her speak it. It is her truth now." His voice was steady, but beneath it lay an ache that surprised even him. That evening, the household changed. Doctors tended Elena in a private chamber while Sophia refused to leave her side. Lorenzo retreated to his study, yet found no peace in its polished wood and thick curtains. On his desk lay the Rinaldi letter proof that his enemies knew more than they should. Arturo had said the word daughter like a weapon. The Rinaldis would not stop. Marco entered without knocking. "They'll strike again, Don. Not just at her, but at the girl." "I know. You can hide her, send her away." Lorenzo's glare cut him short. "She is Vitale blood. No one hides her. She stays where I can see her, where my name shields her." Marco inclined his head. "Then you'll need to teach her what that name means. A Vitale child is never just a child." The words gnawed at Lorenzo long after Marco left. Could he make her carry the weight of his world? Could he shield her innocence from the shadow he himself had built? 2 days later, Sophia wandered into the garden where Lorenzo stood alone staring at the fountain. He had expected her to avoid him, to cling only to her mother, but instead she approached small steps, hesitant yet determined. Cha He turned eyes softening despite himself. "Yes." She twisted the rosary in her hands. "Will Mama be all right?" "She will heal," he answered. "Because I will not allow anything else?" Sophia's lip trembled. "The men who took her, they'll come for me too, won't they?" The honesty of her fear struck him deeper than any bullet. He crouched to meet her gaze. "They will try, but they will never succeed, because you are mine now, and I protect what is mine." Sophia studied him, the hard lines of his face, the certainty in his voice. At last she reached out, small fingers curling around his scarred hand. "I believe you," she whispered. For Lorenzo Vitale, Don of Chicago's most feared family, the words pierced deeper than any oath ever sworn in smoke-filled rooms. For the first time in decades, he felt the fragile weight of something worth more than power. Yet even as that bond was born, the city outside shifted. News of the failed ambush spread through the underworld. The Rinaldis seethed at their humiliation, and in backrooms whispers began alliances in Sicily, debts, unpaid new wars kindling. And in the heart of it all, a girl barely 8 years old had become the spark none of them expected. The Vitale estate was unlike anything Sophia had ever known. The ceilings seemed to touch the sky. The chandeliers glittered like constellations, and every hallway smelled faintly of polished oak and candle wax. Yet to her it was both a palace and a prison. Guards stood at every corner, their suits crisp, their eyes cold. Whenever she stepped too close to the gates, someone appeared silently steering her back toward the heart of the house. For a girl who had spent her life in a cramped apartment with peeling paint and a leaky roof, the estate should have felt like a dream. But dreams did not have shadows that watched from every doorframe. Elena's recovery was slow. The doctor came twice a day checking her arm and whispering that she was lucky the bullet had missed the bone. Sophia stayed close, reading aloud from her worn schoolbooks the words halting but determined. Each time Lorenzo hovered near the doorway, silent watching mother and daughter, as though memorizing a scene he feared might vanish. Sophia began to notice him more, his presence steady, almost protective. At first she tried to avoid his gaze, but when she caught him watching her, he did not look away. His eyes were sharp, dangerous, yet softened when they settled on her. One morning while Elena slept, Sophia wandered into the dining room, where a long table was set with silver and china. To her surprise, Lorenzo was already there, sipping dark coffee. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Eat?" he said simply. She hesitated, then climbed up. Servants brought breadfruit and warm milk. The silence between them was heavy, until Sophia finally whispered, "Do you always have so much food?" "Yes." "And do you eat like this every day?" He studied her carefully before answering. "I eat so my men know I am strong. I eat so others see I lack nothing. But eating like this," he waved at the table, "it does not fill the emptiness." Sophia frowned, buttering her bread slowly. "Then why do it?" Lorenzo leaned back, regarding her with a rare trace of amusement. "Because in this world appearances are weapons. You will learn that, Sophia." She lowered her eyes. "I don't want to learn." He did not rebuke her. Instead, his voice softened. "No child should have to. But you are not just any child." As days passed, the estate became both school and fortress. Marco often appeared to guide her through its halls, teaching her which corridors led to the garden, which doors were forbidden. He showed her the chapel tucked away behind carved wooden doors, where the Vitale family knelt when blood was spilled. "Your father built this house on loyalty," Marco explained one afternoon, as Sophia traced the stained glass windows. "Every stone here was paid for with respect or with blood. To be Vitale is to carry both." The words frightened her, yet also stirred a strange pride. That night, Sophia dreamed of her mother's pale face of ropes biting her wrists and of the word cha echoing in the dark. When she woke, she crept barefoot through the halls until she found herself at Lorenzo's study. The door was ajar. Inside, maps and papers littered the desk, and Lorenzo stood by the window speaking in hushed tones to Marco. "Arturo has friends in Sicily," Lorenzo was saying. "The Santoros, old debts. If they come here, it will not just be the Rinaldis anymore. It will be a war across oceans." Marco nodded grimly. "And the girl?" There was a pause. Then Lorenzo's voice, lower, heavier. "She stays under my roof. She learns who she is. If the Santoros come, they will see she is Vitale blood." Sophia's breath caught. She pressed a hand to her chest, the weight of his words sinking deep. Meanwhile, across the city, Arturo Rinaldi sat in a dim club thick with smoke. His wounded pride had curdled into rage. The failed ambush haunted him, but worse was the revelation that Don Vitale had a daughter. He slammed his glass against the table, shards scattering. "She is the key," Arturo snarled to the men gathered around. "The child is his weakness. We strike through her, and Lorenzo Vitale will crumble. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. Ruggiero Santoro, emissary from Sicily, his voice smooth but laced with venom. We have waited a long time to collect what is owed. If the girl is truly his blood, then she belongs to us as much as to him. We will use her. Arturo smirked, his eyes gleaming. Then let us take back this city together. The pact was sealed with clinking glasses, but beneath it lay something darker, the promise of a war that would drown the streets in blood. Back at the estate, Sophia sat at her mother's bedside, whispering prayers into the quiet. Elena's eyes fluttered open, weary but watchful. "You've been spending time with him," Elena murmured. Sophia nodded. "He's not as scary as he looks." Her mother's face tightened. "He is far scarier, Sophia. Don't ever forget that." Sophia hesitated, then whispered, "But he's also my Cha." "Isn't he?" Elena closed her eyes, turning her face away. No answer came, but silence was an answer of its own. The storm came to Chicago on a night when the streets were slick with rain and the sky pulsed with distant thunder. At the Vitale estate, guards doubled their patrol's lanterns, cutting slashes of light across the gates. Inside, Sophia pressed her face to the window, watching lightning flicker. Something in the air felt wrong, as though the city itself was holding its breath. She was right. Down at the harbor, a ship from Palermo slipped into the docks under cover of night. Its cargo was not grain or fruit, but men, lean, hard-eyed Sicilians who moved with the discipline of soldiers. At their head was Ruggiero Santoro. His black coat clung to his tall frame, and his voice was soft enough to chill the men around him. "We are not here as guests," he told them. "We are here as collectors. Don Vitale has forgotten debts that cross oceans. Now he has a child, a weakness. That is how we will make him remember." Arturo Rinaldi was waiting with cars idling in the fog. Their handshake was cold, more packed than greeting. Arturo sneered. "Lorenzo thinks himself untouchable. Together we'll tear that illusion apart." Back at the estate, life continued with its tense rhythm. Elena's strength slowly returned, though she rarely left her room. Lorenzo had tightened the walls around her, and Sophia with more guards, more locked doors, more eyes. Yet Sophia, restless and sharp, began exploring the hidden corners of the house. One evening she slipped into the library, where Lorenzo sat alone with a glass of brandy. Papers were scattered before him, maps of shipping routes, names circled in ink numbers scratched like wounds. "You're not asleep," he said without looking up. Sophia padded closer. "I had a bad dream. What was it?" She hesitated. "Men on a boat, coming here. They wanted to take me away." Lorenzo's hand froze around the glass. Slowly he lifted his eyes to hers. "You dream like a Vitale," he murmured. She frowned. "What does that mean?" "That you see danger before it knocks on the door." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She climbed up, small hands folded in her lap. He studied her a long moment, then asked, "Do you know why they would want you?" "Because of you," she whispered. "Yes, because you are mine, and because of that they will try to hurt you. But you must never be afraid." Her chin lifted, stubborn. "I am afraid, but I don't want to be." His gaze softened just slightly. "Fear is not weakness. It is a warning. What matters is what you do with it. She leaned forward. "And what do you do with it?" He drained the last of his brandy and set the glass aside. "I turn it into power." That same night, Marco burst into the study, rain dripping from his coat. "Dawn word from the docks. The Santoros are here?" Lorenzo's jaw clenched. "How many dozens? Armed. They've joined hands with Arturo Rinaldi." Sophia's eyes widened, but Lorenzo only placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. "Take her back to her room," he ordered Marco. "No," Sophia blurted, gripping his sleeve. "If they're here for me, don't hide me. Teach me, so I won't be afraid anymore." For the first time, Lorenzo truly looked at her, not as a child to be shielded, but as blood of his blood. He said nothing, but something in his expression shifted as though a door had opened inside him. The next day, the city stirred with whispers. Murders in the South Docks, shipments burned loyal men vanishing overnight. The Rinaldis and Santoros had struck their first blow, and the message was clear: the Vitale Empire would bleed. At the estate, Lorenzo gathered his men in the war room. Maps stretched across the table, red pins marking allies, black pins marking enemies. Sophia crept in quietly, watching from the corner as voices rose and fell. "We can't fight both families," Marco said. "The Rinaldis have numbers, the Santoros have old debts. Together they'll drown us." Lorenzo lit a cigar, the smoke curling upward like a serpent. "Then we cut their heads before they strike deeper. Arturo wants my daughter. Ruggiero wants my legacy. Let them come for both. They'll find I am still the one who decides who lives in this city." His men bowed their heads. The plan was set. That night, Lorenzo found Sophia sitting by Elena's bed, her eyes solemn. "They're coming for me, aren't they?" she asked. "Yes," he admitted. She looked at him steadily. "Then promise me you'll teach me to be strong. Like a Vitale." He reached out, brushing her hair back gently, and for a moment the Don of Chicago was only a father with trembling hands. "I promise." But even as he spoke, thunder rolled over the city, and far away in the dark, Arturo Rinaldi and Ruggiero Santoro raised their glasses. The war had begun. The mornings at the Vitale estate changed. Once Sophia would wake to sunlight streaming across marble floors, to the faint clatter of dishes being prepared for breakfast. Now she woke to discipline. Marco arrived at dawn, sharp and silent, his presence filling her doorway like a shadow. Up, he ordered not unkindly, but without room for refusal. At first she pouted, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Why so early?" "Because enemies don't wait until you're ready," Marco replied. "And because your father said you must learn." The training began in the gardens where gravel paths wound between tall hedges. Marco taught her how to listen to footsteps, to whispers, to the shift of air when someone drew near. He blindfolded her, spun her around, and made her point to where he stood. She failed, stumbled, cried in frustration. But Lorenzo was there, leaning against the balustrade, watching. His voice was low but firm. Again. So she tried again and again, until one morning she pointed straight toward Marco's quiet breath, and Lorenzo's mouth curved with the faintest shadow of pride. Other lessons followed. Marco placed everyday objects before her, a fork, a belt, a glass bottle, and asked, "If you had nothing else, how would you defend yourself?" Sophia stared confused. They're just things. No, Marco corrected. They're survival. In the right hands, everything becomes a weapon. She picked up the fork, clutching it like a dagger. Marco nodded. Good. Never forget you are small, but small can be sharp. In the evenings, Lorenzo added his own lessons. Not with knives or fists, but with words. He sat her before maps spread across the table, pointing to territories marked in red and black. These lines are not streets, he told her. They are power. If you know where power lies, you know how to move safely through the world. Sophia traced the streets with her finger wide-eyed. So, if I learn all this, I'll be safe. He leaned closer, his voice steady. Safe, no, but stronger. And strength is the only shield you will ever trust. Meanwhile, the war outside the walls grew sharper. The Santoros struck with Sicilian ruthlessness. Dockyards burned trucks carrying Vitali goods. Vanished loyal men disappeared. Arturo Rinaldi spread lies in the clubs and bars, whispers that Lorenzo had grown weak, too distracted by his newfound child. One night Marco returned with blood on his sleeve. Sophia saw it when he tried to hide the torn fabric, and her heart clenched. "Did they hurt you?" she asked, voice trembling. Marco only smiled faintly. "Not me, little one. But others weren't so lucky." Lorenzo's face hardened when he heard. "It will not continue. Tomorrow we strike back." That night, Sophia crept into Lorenzo's study. He was alone, smoking in silence. "Cha," she said softly. He glanced at her, exhaling a slow ribbon of smoke. "You should be asleep." "I can't. Not when everyone's bleeding because of me." The words struck him deep. He set down the cigar and pulled her onto his knee. Something he had never done before. "This is not your fault," he said. "You did not ask for their hate. You did not choose this war. They come for you because you are mine, and because of that, I will never stop fighting." She looked up at him, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "Then let me fight too." His chest tightened. She was so young, yet the fire in her words was unmistakable. One day, perhaps, he whispered, "But for now you will learn. You will grow. And you will survive. That is how you will fight." The following dawn, the estate roared with movement. Black cars lined the courtyard, engines humming. Men strapped holsters to their sides, checked rifles, spoke in low tones. Sophia watched from the steps, clutching the rosary in her hand. Lorenzo stood at the center, his coat draped over his shoulders like a mantle of power. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice breaking. He turned to her, his gaze steady, carved from stone. "To remind Arturo Rinaldi and the Santoros who rules this city." Sophia's small hands trembled, but she whispered back, "Come back. Promise me, Cha." For the first time, the Don bent his head and kissed her brow. "I promise." Then he stepped into the waiting car, and the convoy rolled into the storm that was waiting in Chicago's streets. The streets of Chicago burned with war. Engines thundered down the wet avenues as Lorenzo's convoy cut through the night headlights, slicing the darkness. Windows along the alleys, shuttered doors bolted. People knew when to vanish. The scent of blood was already in the air. Inside the lead car, Lorenzo sat with his hands clasped around his cane, though he didn't need it. His eyes were fixed forward, hard and cold, yet behind them flickered the memory of Sophia's small voice whispering, "Promise me, Cha." That promise weighed more than the gun at his side. At the docks, the Rinaldis and Santoros had gathered. Arturo stood on a platform of stacked crates, his voice echoing across the harbor. The Vitale name is nothing but smoke. Tonight we take the city. Ruggiero Santoro was beside him, tall and silent, his men spread like shadows among the shipping containers. Sicilian knives glinted in the rain, guns-loaded eyes burning with old vendettas. Then came the roar of engines, the slam of brakes, the doors swinging open. The Vitale men poured out in dark suits, rifles raised, every movement sharp as clockwork. Lorenzo stepped forward, coat billowing in the storm, and the night itself seemed to pause. Chicago. He called, his voice deep, carrying over the rain. Does not bow to thieves or debt collectors. It bows to me. The first shot cracked through the silence. Chaos erupted. Gunfire rattled, echoing against metal walls. Sparks flew as bullets struck steelmen. Shouted curses mingled with screams. The docks became a battlefield of smoke and blood. Marco was everywhere at once, pulling men into cover, firing clean and precise. Vitale soldiers advanced in disciplined lines while the Sicilians countered with knives in the dark, cutting throats in silence. The Rinaldis fought dirtier Molotovs hurled into crates, fires climbing fast. Lorenzo moved like a force of nature, a pistol in each hand, his coat sweeping, his aim merciless. Arturo saw him through the haze and sneered, raising his gun only for Lorenzo's bullet to smash the weapon from his grasp. You should have stayed in your hole, Arturo. Lorenzo growled, striding closer through the smoke. But Santoro stepped forward, blocking his path knife gleaming under the dock lights. Old debts must be paid, Vitale. Their clash was brutal, steel against steel, gunfire cracking around them. Lorenzo parried the knife with his cane, swung hard, bones crunching. Santoro staggered, but his eyes glowed with fanatic fury. Miles away at the estate, Sophia pressed her ear to the cold window pane. She could not see the war, but she felt it in the rumble under her feet, the distant crack of thunder that was not thunder at all. Elena sat beside her, pale and anxious. Don't listen, Mia Piccola, she whispered. He will return. But Sophia could not tear herself away from the night. Her fingers clutched the rosary until the beads dug into her skin. She whispered to herself over and over, He promised. He promised. Back at the docks, firelight turned the harbor red. Bodies lay scattered smoke, choking the air. The Vitale men pressed harder, driving the Rinaldis back step by step. Marco found Lorenzo amid the chaos, blood streaked across his temple. We've broken their lines, Arturo is fleeing. Let him run, Lorenzo said coldly, shoving Santoro backward with a brutal strike. He will watch his empire rot before I take his head. But Santoro lunged again, blade flashing. Lorenzo caught his wrist, twisted until the bones snapped, then shoved the broken man into the flames of a burning crate. Santoro's scream was swallowed by the fire. The docks were theirs. Hours later, the convoy returned to the estate. The guards opened the gates, lanterns flaring in the mist. Sophia was waiting on the steps, barefoot in her nightdress, eyes wide and sleepless. Lorenzo stepped from the car, his coat torn, blood on his hands. For a heartbeat, the Don and the father were one and the same. Sophia ran to him, clutching his leg, face pressed against the fabric. You came back, she whispered. His hand, rough and scarred, came down to rest on her hair. I promised. Behind him, Marco's men carried the wounded inside, their faces grim. The war was far from over. The Rinaldi's still breathed debts still lingered. But in that moment, Lorenzo Vitale, Don of Chicago, knew there was one thing he could not afford to lose. Not the docks, not the city, but the small child who had called him Cha and believed he would always return. The city did not sleep after the docks burned. Chicago was restless, its streets buzzing with rumor. Rinaldi men dead in the harbor. Sicilian blood spilled in foreign soil. Some whispered Lorenzo Vitale was finished. Others swore he had risen from shadow like a devil who could not be killed. Inside the Vitale estate, silence reigned. The great halls smelled of gunpowder, carried on coats of iron and smoke clinging to men's hair. Sophia stayed close to her mother, but her eyes followed every guard, every hushed word. She understood now that the house itself breathed with danger. Lorenzo did not rest. In his study, maps were spread across the table once again. Marco stood opposite him, face drawn from sleepless nights. "Arturo is broken, but not gone," Marco said. "The Santoros have lost their emissary, yet Sicily will not forget. If we do not end this quickly, they will send more." Lorenzo's hand tightened on his glass. "Then we end it quickly. Arturo will not live to draw another breath in my city." The opportunity came 3 nights later. Word reached the estate that Arturo had retreated to an abandoned brewery on the south side, gathering the remnants of his men. Some called it a fortress. Lorenzo saw it as a tomb waiting to be sealed. Before he left, Sophia found him at the door. She was no longer trembling, though her hands were small and pale as she clutched his sleeve. "Cha," she said softly, "will you kill him?" Lorenzo looked down at her, and for the first time he allowed himself the truth. "Yes." Her lip quivered, but she did not cry. Instead, she whispered, "Then come back. Because if you don't, I'll never forgive you." Something inside him cracked at those words. He cupped her cheek, his voice low. "I will return, Sophia. I swear it on the blood in my veins." The assault on the brewery was swift and merciless. Black cars fanned out under the cover of night. Headlights darkened. Vitale men moved with silent precision, slipping through broken windows, scaling rusted stairwells. Gunfire erupted a storm in the shadows. Bottles' shattered flames caught the stench of alcohol, and smoke filled the air. In the heart of it, Arturo Rinaldi stood with pistol-drawn desperation etched into every line of his face. "Lorenzo," he roared over the chaos. "You think you own this city? You're nothing without your lies." Lorenzo advanced, pistol-steady coat trailing like a dark flag. "No, Arturo. I am nothing without loyalty. That is why you lost. You betrayed even your own." They circled each other among the burning vats. Arturo fired mist. Lorenzo's shot struck true, driving Arturo to his knees. "Mercy," Arturo spat, clutching his wound. "You have a daughter now, show mercy for her sake." Lorenzo's gaze hardened. "For her sake, I cannot." One final shot rang out. Arturo fell lifeless on the wet floor. By dawn, the brewery was ash. The Rinaldi family was shattered, their remnants scattering like rats. The Santoros would bide their time across the sea, but for now, Chicago belonged to the Vitales once more. When Lorenzo returned to the estate, his coat smelled of smoke, his eyes heavy. Sophia was waiting on the steps again, but this time she did not run to him. She stood tall, small hands clenched, watching him with solemn eyes. "You did it," she whispered. He nodded. "It is done." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "Then will you stay now? Not just fight. Not just kill. Stay. Be my cha." The words cut deeper than any bullet. Lorenzo, the man who had carved empires with iron and fire, found himself faltering before a child's plea. Slowly he knelt, bringing himself down to her height. "I will stay," he murmured, "and I will fight, but not only for the city. For you. Always for you." Sophia's arms wrapped tight around his neck. For the first time, Lorenzo held her without fear of breaking. The war was not over somewhere across the ocean. The Santoros' plotted debts still whispered in dark corners. But for now, within the high walls of the Vitali estate, a fragile peace held. A Mafia don had become a father. And in the shadows of Chicago, every rival now knew Lorenzo Vitali was no longer fighting for power alone. He was fighting for blood.